stand over here.
Cool. Hold on a second.
It's fun to me.
Okay. You're good.
All right. Hi all, I'm Miles Rudakovitz, and I made a bookshelf. So I was inspired by a few things. Firstly, my bookshelf broke, and I needed a new one. And then I also really like the aesthetic of the industrial chic. I just really like the tables made out of pipes and plywood and stuff. I just think it looks cool. It's very utilitarian and cheap, which is always great for starving college students like ourselves. And then also, I grew up in the Midwest, where oftentimes at the restaurants like a Machine Shed in good old Rockford, Illinois, they have old saws and old farming equipment mounted on the wall, displaying proudly their agricultural heritage. So I wanted to do something that incorporates both of those. My design process was very atypical. I had an idea, played it by ear, and I made a finished product. Basically what this meant was I knew a lot of it. I would just kind of have to figure out as I went, because a lot of the materials would have been very up in the air. Because specifically my first idea was to use an old ladder. I thought it would be interesting if I had the ladder with some boards going across it, and then plants on the outside, and then the books in the middle. This required a ladder, which unfortunately I was unable to find at Resource, but I did enjoy the triangular shape of it, so when I was at Resource, I found what are called sawhorses. Basically, they're little things made of 2x4s that clamp onto 2x4s that give you a surface upon which to cut wood. So I figured I could stack 3 into this triangular pattern, put supports, make shelves across it, and then have books in the more regular spaces and the more atypical spaces I could put plants. So once I had the sawhorses, I wanted to restore them because they were pretty well beat up. Basically, I did this process by getting the sawhorses. I took a wire brush all over the wood and up on the metal, and then I took 2 grits of sandpaper, 1 coarse and 1 fine, to polish up the wood and make it look nice. You can see here's the original ones. Right here is a pre-restored one, and this is a restored one. The wood's nice and ready to be stained, and I also cleaned up the bracket up at the top. In addition to this, I also hammered the brackets a little bit to make everything a little bit more secure and stable. Then after that, I chose a nice gunstock red stain for the wood itself, and I thought that brought out a lot of the nice blues in the metal up at the bracket, and I was very happy with that. Let them sit out for a few days to cure. And then before I had done that, I was thinking about, well, along the process you can see they're restored but not yet stained. I was thinking about how I would orient them. And I knew I wanted them in this orientation, but I didn't know what would be the best way to do this. Because if you look here, you can see that to have them clamp on, they would be at a weird angle and I would have to cut the legs. So one of the ideas I had was to add a block of wood that would be clamped into each one of those, secure a 2x4, not a 2x4, but a shelving piece across it and then screw it in. I set something up like that, didn't like the way it looked, so what I ended up doing was I hammered down this inner part of the bracket on the top of those 2 bottom supports, and then I was able to feed in the legs of the top one and screw them in to give a nice, even, steady base. And in addition to this, these guys being made of 2x4s are about that wide, which I felt would be an unstable base upon which to store my books. So I used a piece of the material I used for the shelving, cut it extra wide, maybe about 4 inches wide as opposed to the, or maybe, I don't know. It was a little bit wide in the base, so it's significantly more stable now. So then I made the actual shelving bits of it, and I used this old siding from a project I had made a while ago where essentially I, without permission from my landlord, built an addition onto the house. Ended up taking that down, had this great siding. I think it was from an old barn because it's painted red and the planks interlock into each other. It was rotted on the ends and on the interlocking ends, so basically what I did was I took a saw, chopped it off, took a chisel and flattened out the edges, cleaned them up, sanded them, made them nice and clean. and then I cut them to length. To actually mount the shelves on the upper triangles of the system, I used angle brackets that I had hammered to shape, and then I cut these and I had to sand them so that they'd fit better in. Clearly I'm going to be putting books on the bottom and then little Giuseppe the plant on the shelf. For these for these inner layers, I didn't actually support them in anything. I sanded them at an angle so that they'd fit nice, and it's not really going to be going anywhere, so I decided that just having them steady, or just sitting on top of it would be sufficient. And then I brought it into my room, and it's been sitting there ever since. Actually, while I was making this, I was listening to an audiobook by Nick Offerman, so it felt very appropriate. I'm very happy with how it turned out both aesthetically and functionally. It's very stable, it holds my plants very well. I think I'll use it for years to come. And in terms of the actual visuals of it, I really like the triangular shape of the thing. It just makes me happy whenever I look at it. It really brings out that farm feel to me that makes me feel like I'm at home, and I really like the way that the blue of the metal contrasts with the red of the wood. Thank you. Any questions?
First of all, we have